Hello, everyone, and welcome to another specialish episode of the Conversations with Coaches podcast, Lessons. Another one of those where I kind of give back a little bit of what I've been given so frequently over the course of this podcast and over the course of just talking with so many different coaches. This one, that doesn't really apply only to coaches. It actually applies very broadly. Quite frankly, I mean, coaches, entrepreneurs, leaders, you know that it is frightfully easy to spread yourself a little too thin, to try to spend, 30 hours of a 24-hour day, so to speak, to hurl yourself towards what might be increasingly impossible standards. There's always these plateaus or these ceilings or these obstacles that aren't just obstacles to be overcome, but they are almost like warnings where it's just like, hey, you might be trying to do too much. Whether it is, and there are so many different ways to make this mistake, which again, still a learning opportunity. But there are so many different ways to make it. I know one that I fall into frequently is a tendency towards perfectionism. Now, I'm not going to say perfectionism. That's almost like a belief where I'm just like, I want to dial everything in and get it just right before I can call it done. Oh, I have tripped over my own feet in pursuit of perfectionism more times than I care to count. But one thing I've been learning, a lesson I've been learning and likely will continue to learn as I just develop and grow as a person, hopefully, is that peak performance, true like peak performance, doing the best in the best ways at the best times with the best people, is really a matter of focus and choice. You can't do everything to its utmost at all times. It is, you say it like that, and it sounds as absurd as it is. But don't we often find ourselves in that mode, behaving in that way? And so this lesson that I've been working really hard and will continue to work hard to allow to like settle in on me is what I kind of like to call lowering the right bars. There are certain bars that need to be maintained at a high standard, maybe the highest. There are certain things that you ought not to compromise on, that you ought to always strive to achieve and exceed in all ways possible. And while that's not the subject of this little talk right here, I also believe that it's a very individual decision. It depends on a lot of factors that involve you, who you are, who you want to be, the things you're trying to achieve in life, the impact you're trying to have, the business you're running, the relationships you have, the family you have. There are certain bars that ought to be maintained at the highest possible level. But here's the lesson for me. There are certain bars that can be lowered. There are certain bars that they serve the exact purpose at a lower height as they do at the tippy top that they could possibly be set. And this is I'm going to be navigating this truth, I think, for the remainder of my days, happily so. I hope I am truly a lifelong learner, not just in name, but in practice. But learning which bars in my life, maybe not even just can be, but should be lowered to a more reasonable height, to a height where they belong, so that my best efforts, my peak performance, my maximum impact can be dedicated to those bars which need to remain ever high. That's basically the lesson, at least the way that I'm phrasing it right now. This is another one of those that comes to me in so many different forms, so many different distillations of wisdom from so many different sources. But learning how to lower the right bars and keep the right ones high, basically have the right bar, have bars at the right level, whatever that level happens to be, is a kind of discernment that I aspire to develop and grow in myself, and also help others to grow as well. Sometimes it can be quite a burden to feel like everything has to be at a certain level at all times. I'm sure many of you coaches run into this with many of your clients, where there is at least an element of burnout, where they've come to a place where they've gotten a little lost. And a lot of times, especially with the higher achievers, you put yourself in a position where all of your bars, all of your standards cannot be cleared. And then there's this like kind of cascading downward spiral effect. And you find yourself in a place where all of a sudden the stuff that did matter, the stuff that required your best effort and attention, now isn't getting it because you're running almost on empty. Anyway, that's a different problem for a different day. But lowering the right bars, identifying which bars ought to be lower, putting those bars at their appropriate height so that every level gets all the attention it deserves and that your impact is maximized. quite frankly. So that's pretty much it for me on this subject. I have a lot more to say on this, I think. But that was the lesson I wanted to impart, the thing I think that was ready to share, at least in these words today. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you again very soon.